Pakistan more than $33 billion in aid over the last 15 years, and they have given us nothing but lies and deceit, thinking of our leaders as fools. They give safe haven to the terrorists we hunt in Afghanistan with little help. No more. Well, within the hour, President Trump then tweeted about Iran, saying, quote, Iran is failing at every level despite the terrible deal made with them by the Obama administration. The great Iranian people have been repressed for many years. He goes on to say they are hungry for food and for freedom, along with human rights, and wealth of Iran is being looted. And then this, which was really sort of eyebrow raising for many. He said, time for change, in all caps. So the president is referring to anti-government protests in Iran that have left 12 people dead this weekend. And as he slams these nations on this New Year's Day, North Korea's dictator is also seizing the moment. Kim Jong-un told his people that the mainland U.S. is within his range, and, quote, the nuclear button is always on the desk of my office. Joining me now to talk about this is CNN White House correspondent Abby Phillip. Abby, you're with the president in Florida, where he is just about to leave for Washington. The president, you're watching his tweets. He's got these foreign affairs issues obviously on his mind, but what's on his agenda today as he returns to Washington?
Hi, Brianna. Yeah, when the president gets back to D.C., it's going to be all actually about domestic policy, about the economy, and about the agenda that he's hoping to dive right into in the new year with congressional Republicans. He's going to sit down at Camp David with House Speaker Paul Ryan and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to hash out the plan for the coming months. And on the agenda is, of course, infrastructure, which he's been talking quite a bit about, and also perhaps welfare reform. When he was at his New Year's Eve party at Mar-a-Lago last night, he was talking to his supporters and guests at his club a little bit about what they can expect in the new year. And he said, touting some of this economic growth, he said more is coming in 2018. Take a listen to what he had to say.
We're going to have a great 2018. It's going to be something very, very special. It's all kicking in. Everybody's going to love is what's happening with our country, because we're taking this big, beautiful ship and we're slowly turning it around. I'd like to do it faster.
Well, the president seems pretty optimistic about the new year ahead. Also on his agenda, Brianna, he's going to have his first presidential physical toward the beginning of the month, this January. The White House says they're going to release the results of that when that occurs.
All right, that'll be very interesting. Abby Phillip in West Palm Beach, thank you so much for that report. And I do want to take a deep dive now on the year ahead with CNN political commentators Hillary Rosen and Jack Kingston. Hillary is a Democratic strategist and Jack is a Republican, and he used to be a congressman for Georgia. I wonder, Hillary, there are some things that the president he's talking about bipartisanship, and he wants Democrats to join with him on some things like infrastructure. What could he do that would actually put them in a tough spot and force them to work with him in an election year?
Well, I think Democrats want to work on infrastructure. I don't think it would be a tough spot at all. I think that they've been talking about it for a long time. They've actually wanted to use some of this money that was spent on tax reform for lowering rates on infrastructure. The administration was against that. So I think if the president came to Democrats with a real infrastructure proposal, that's good for working men and women across the country. It's good for labor unions. It's good for, our crumbling roads and bridges. I think the Democrats would embrace it.
But look, if they're looking at polls that show it is possible there could be a Democratic wave here in the midterm elections in 2018, isn't there also an incentive for them to not go along with something that isn't extremely palatable to them?
Well, the fight for infrastructure has always been Republicans have been against it because they only believe in spending through the tax code, not through the actual federal budget. But I think Democrats have plenty to run on in 2018. Look, we have hundreds of thousands of Americans in Puerto Rico without power. We're about to lose millions of people off of health insurance rolls. Fewer jobs were actually created in 2017 than were created in each of the 5 years prior to President Trump coming in. Democrats have a lot to run on already. If there are a couple of things that they can do proactively, I think that they would work with the president.
I don't know. I think all we've seen from Chuck Schumer is the party of no, and they've just personified negative politics. You know, when I think about the resistance, I think about, okay, unemployment at the lowest time, at the lowest level in maybe 20 years, $5 trillion new dollars added to the economy because of stock market growth, opportunities because of less regulation of businesses, lower energy costs, interest rates have stayed low, illegal border crossings are down. I don't know what the resistance is going to do for itself. I think that the Democrats would be better to get on board with the president and say, let's work for infrastructure. Let's try to come up with a compromise on immigration. Let's do something on DACA, and let's deal with the budget, because the budget is something that's going to be right in the president's face on the 19th of January, and it's going to have to be dealt with.
But with the president striking the tone, the very strident tone that he so often does, the divisive tone, Jack, and with maybe a lag in wage growth that would actually make a lot of Americans feel, oh, I'm doing better. You know, just that sort of sense of if they do a temperature check on themselves, even economically, they would feel like they are doing a lot better. I mean, aren't those areas that could still give Democrats a lot of incentive to not go
I mean, he
along?
already attacked Democrats just 2 days ago for you know, out of the blue. So this isn't a guy who seems to be desperate to work with Democrats.
You know, but I think that's some of the give and take of Washington. I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of punching back and forth. But let me say this. You have 350 seats that are pretty well Democrat and Republican regardless of what happens. Then you have 60 competitive seats, and then you have 21 toss-up seats. Of those 21 toss-up seats, 17 are Republican. And then you go back to the competitive seats, well, we're going to have to spend money. They lean Republican, but we're going to have to spend money to keep them, which makes the vulnerable seats even more vulnerable. So I think where the Democrats have the best wind at their back really is just history, just plain and simple. The party that rules the White House is on a disadvantage on the even years.
I think one other point on I agree with Jack's math here. This will be a very instructive spring, because these Republicans in these vulnerable seats are going to make a decision not based on what people on cable TV say and not based on, you know, anybody else, but what they're hearing, you know, in Main Street in terms of whether they want to be with the president or not with the president. If we start to see these Republicans, like we've seen, for instance, these Republicans in Northern Virginia running away from the president, if we start to see Republicans in vulnerable districts running away from the president starting this spring, that will be very telling, and that will change the legislative agenda.
If we do see that, but so far we have not seen that. Ed Gillespie in Virginia was in a tough spot because it's a purple state on a good year for us right now. But you know, aside from that, everybody in Alabama and the other races in Georgia, for example, and the other congressional races, they all clung to President Trump and said, "I'm the Trump candidate."
Those are safer areas.
Yeah,
they are. But
I'm talking about,
you be
for
looking
instance,
at a Virginia as opposed to a Georgia.
and the Northeast. But what I'm saying is the history.
You've got 24 House districts where Hillary Clinton won by beat Donald Trump, and they're now held by Republicans. All you need are sort of those districts and two more. So the math does favor Democrats.
I do want to switch gears and talk about the Russia investigation, because there's this report out in the New York Times that we've seen that George Papadopoulos, who was the first Trump campaign advisor to plead guilty to lying to the FBI, had told an Australian diplomat back in May 2016, so before the election, in sort of that spring, summer into the election, that the Russians had dirt on Hillary Clinton. This was, according to this report, after a night of heavy drinking. And the Australians then pass it along to their American counterparts after you start seeing the DNC WikiLeaks emails coming out in July of 2016. This, we have found out, Jack, is something that may have been the spark to this Russian inquiry. That really undercuts what President Trump has been trying to hammer home, which is that it's all entirely based on this dossier.
Well, this is what I would say, that the Russian investigation did not start with Mueller. It's been going on for a year and a half. We knew the Russians were trying to hack the election during the election, but there has been no proof, no evidence of collusion whatsoever. But the Democrats, the critics of Trump, are always, oh, it's about, the shoe's about to fall. We are about to get him. We're this close. We've been hearing that for months and months.
What about the desire on the part of Donald Trump Jr. and Paul Manafort and Jared Kushner to get dirt from Russians?
Well, let me say this. Having been in a number of campaigns and supported a lot of candidates, people come to you all the time and say, I've got something on your opponent, and sometimes you do listen to them. So, I mean, setting up a meeting like that is not nefarious at all. Apparently, there was no information exchanged. There was nothing acted upon.
But from the Russians.
But I think we
And
would
when the
know.
president, when the then, well, not the president at the time, when Donald Trump had been warned
Well, with
about
all the
possible
leaks that have been
interference.
going on and the excessive partisanship in this investigation, and not to mention the tainted Mueller team, we would know about it if there was something there. But there hasn't been anything that's come of any substance whatsoever. Papadopoulos really was a coffee boy. I'd never heard of him. I was very active in the campaign. Never heard of him whatsoever.
Well, we've seen over and over again how he had a bigger role than people are admitting. But there's two issues here. The first issue is whether or not there is so-called collusion with the Trump campaign, whether the Trump campaign worked with the Russian government to undermine the election. The other issue, though, is that the Russian government used many outlets, as we know, to try and undermine the election, regardless of whether the Trump campaign actually worked for it. As a Democrat, I would feel good as a start if we just had our president try and push back on Russia for actually trying to interfere in the election. And that is the issue that I think we can't, we're conflating them so much because we're appalled that the president is still unwilling to listen to the intelligence agencies to hold Russia accountable for actually trying to undermine the U.S. democracy. And if he did that, some of this other stuff might not look as nefarious as it does. But, now all we have is sort of this systematic, and we just heard Jack do it again, systematic trying to undermine Mueller's investigation, Mueller's integrity, Mueller's independence.
People like Peter Strzok have already done that job.
People keep doing that.
I mean,
they
bumped him out of the investigation.
They did when it was found out how partisan he was. Why was he even there to begin with? And then what about Julie Reed? What about
Not
James
when it was
Quarles?
public. They did it
What
before when
about Andy McCabe? Why doesn't he tell us what this insurance policy was? What about Quarles and Andrew Weissman, who tells Sally Yates, great job defining the Department of Justice?
This is not going to work.
What about Bruce Ohm? I mean,
This is a systematic Republican attempt to undermine, an independent law enforcement investigation.
You guys wouldn't stand for it, Hillary. You know you want it.
Oh,
you would be outraged, and you should be outraged.
The level of hypocrisy about outrage right now is
But
beyond
let me say this. I would feel better if I would hear Dianne Feinstein or Mark Warner just once say, you know what? I'm not a Trump fan, as you know. However, I am concerned about Russia hacking into our election, and I want to look at this in a nonpartisan level about some of the charges. But you don't hear that.
They have said that
No, their
100
whole
times.
prism is get
100
Trump.
times.
Their whole prism is get
The
Trump.
entire first 6 months of the Intelligence Committee investigation was the Russian undermining of the election. It was not an investigation of Donald.
It was all denial of the
It was
election
not an
results.
investigation into
It
Donald
was all
Trump
denial.
until he fired James
I'll
Comey.
make a New Year's
brought this on
prediction.
himself.
I'll make a New Year's prediction. There
brought
will
this
be
on
no
himself.
evidence found in this
Okay. Well,
investigation.
what
We'll
was he
probably
afraid
find.
of?
I mean, Flynn lied. That's probably where it's going to go.
We will
stuff like
see if
that.
your prediction is correct, Jack Kingston. If nothing is found, we don't know at this point. All right, you were just getting so good, but we have to leave it there. The clock is ticking. Jack Kingston, Hillary Rosen, thank you so much.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. We all agree
and
on
go
that.
Dogs in Pasadena today in the Rose Bowl.
All right. We'll let you have the plug. All right, thanks so much for that.